The white light in the medical bay of Sentinel-7 space station was harsh, clinical, and precisely how Krill preferred it. The Xylorian biologist adjusted the calibration on his ocular implants, reducing the glare reflecting off the polished metal surfaces that surrounded him. Year 2475 by Earth's calendar, a measurement Krill had reluctantly adopted since joining the Interplanetary Medical Corps, marked his 5th rotation aboard this orbital outpost. As the station's senior xenobiological physician, his laboratory was his sanctuary. Here, among his instruments and specimens, the universe made perfect sense. Specimen 7 Delta shows promising cellular adaptation to the zero-gravity environment, Krill dictated to his neural recorder. His voice, although humanoid in structure, carried the distinct harmonic undertones of his species, a slight, melodic vibration that humans often described as singing while speaking. The Xylorian continued his examination, 3-fingered hands moving with practiced precision across holographic displays. His pale blue skin reflected the monitor's glow, giving him an almost spectral appearance in the sterile environment. The airlock at the far end of the laboratory hissed open. Krill did not need to look up. The soft, uneven footfall pattern identified the visitor immediately. "Earth Engineer Min," he acknowledged, his voice deliberately flat. "Your presence was not scheduled for this rotation." Lana Min stepped into the laboratory, her dark hair pulled back in a practical bun that accentuated her sharp features. Unlike the flowing medical garments of the Xylorians, her Earth Alliance uniform was fitted and utilitarian, with multiple pockets filled with tools that Krill found unnecessarily redundant. Technology should be integrated, not carried, in his opinion. "Good morning to you too, Krill," Lana replied, her lips curving slightly upward. She had long since stopped expecting conventional pleasantries from the alien physician. "Command sent me to check the biomedical filtration systems. Apparently, there's been some anomalous readings from Deck C." Krill's elongated fingers paused over his work. The systems were calibrated to peak efficiency during the last lunar cycle. Error is statistically improbable. "And yet, here I am," Lana said, moving toward the central control panel. She had learned to interpret Krill's statements, not as rudeness, but as literal interpretations of fact, a cultural difference she had grown to appreciate, if not fully understand. "May I?" The Xylorian nodded once, a concession he rarely granted to other station personnel. In the 5 Earth months since Engineer Min had been assigned to Sentinel-7, he had observed that her work was methodical, precise, and, most importantly, she did not engage in what humans called small talk while performing her duties. It was acceptable. Lana's fingers danced across the holographic interface, pulling up diagnostics and system schematics with practiced ease. "You know," she said without looking up, "you might actually like Earth one day. The biodiversity alone would give you research material for several lifetimes. The atmospheric composition of your planet is incompatible with my respiratory system," Krill stated flatly, "and the gravitational pull would require extensive physiological modifications." "That's what environmental suits are for," Lana countered. "And we have artificial gravity modulators now. You wouldn't even notice the difference after the first few days." Krill made a sound that might have been the Xylorian equivalent of a dismissive snort. "The purpose of scientific observation is not to be comfortable. Engineer Min, it is to—" A sound interrupted him, faint at first, then growing in intensity. Both Lana and Krill turned toward the quarantine chamber at the far end of the laboratory. "What is that?" Lana asked, her brow furrowing. Krill moved swiftly to the chamber's observation panel, behind the transparent barrier. A small figure was stirring on the examination table. The creature, no larger than a human child of approximately 6 Earth years, was awakening from sedation. Its skin had the mottled appearance of both scales and soft tissue. with an iridescent quality that shifted between green and gold in the chamber's light. "The specimen is vocalizing," Krill observed, his long fingers activating the monitoring equipment. "Unusual. Previous examinations indicated minimal vocal capabilities." But Lana was already moving past him, pressing her hand against the transparent barrier. "It's not just vocalizing," she said, her voice suddenly tight. "It's crying." Krill tilted his head, the gesture indicating confusion in both their species. "Crying. I am familiar with the human lexicon, Engineer Min. Crying refers to the lacrimal secretion produced by emotional distress or physical irritation. This specimen does not possess lacrimal glands analogous to humanoid species." Lana turned to him, her dark eyes reflecting both concern and something else Krill could not immediately categorize. "Look at it, Krill. Really look. The shaking body. The sounds. It's in distress. It's afraid." The alien physician moved closer to the barrier, his ocular implants zooming in to observe the small creature more carefully. The specimen was indeed trembling, its six-limbed body curled into what Krill recognized as a defensive posture. The sounds it made were high-pitched, irregular, and punctuated by sharp inhalations. "Interesting," he murmured, his scientific curiosity piqued. "The physiological response mimics emotional distress patterns observed in several sentient species. Yet, according to our scans, this life form has only rudimentary neural pathways. It should not be capable of complex emotional responses." Lana's hand pressed harder against the barrier. "Theory and reality don't always align. Krill, whatever your scans say, that child is terrified." "Child?" Krill repeated, the term striking him as oddly imprecise. "This is a biological specimen collected from the crash site on asteroid K-14. Its origin and species classification remain undetermined." "It's a child," Lana insisted, her voice taking on an edge Krill had not heard before. "Regardless of species, it's young, vulnerable, and right now, it's crying out for comfort." The Xylorian's elongated fingers moved across his datapad, reviewing the information collected during the specimen's retrieval. "The rescue team found it in a stasis pod. No other survivors were located. Protocol dictates complete biological evaluation before—" "Before what?" Lana interrupted, turning to face him fully. "Before treating it like a sentient being? Before acknowledging its distress?" Krill blinked his large, pupilless eyes slowly, a gesture that among his people indicated careful consideration. "Engineer Min, your emotional response is clouding objective analysis. The specimen's behavior could be an automatic response to environmental stimuli, not evidence of sentience or emotional capacity." The sound from within the chamber suddenly intensified, rising to a pitch that made Lana wince. She spun back toward the barrier, her expression hardening with resolve. "Open the chamber," she said, her voice quiet but firm. Krill straightened to his full height, nearly a foot taller than the human engineer. "That would violate containment protocol. We have not completed pathogen analysis or—" "Your preliminary scan showed no biological hazards," Lana countered, gesturing to the data scrolling across the nearest monitor. "And that child has been in isolation for over 72 hours. Do you know what isolation does to developing minds, Krill, across nearly every species studied?" The Xylorian remained still, his expression unreadable to human eyes. But Lana had worked alongside him long enough to notice the subtle shift in his posture, the almost imperceptible flutter of the respiratory membranes at his neck, signs of internal conflict. "Please," she added, her voice softening. "I've reviewed your data. The risk is minimal, and the potential benefit—" She glanced back at the trembling creature. "Some things can't be measured by your instruments, Krill." For 13 standard seconds, Krill counted precisely, Neither of them spoke. The only sound was the creature's continued distress and the soft hum of the laboratory equipment. Finally, the Xylorian moved to the control panel. "I will allow you 30 Earth minutes of supervised interaction," he stated, his tone making it clear this was a significant concession. "Environmental monitors will remain active. At the first sign of biological incompatibility or threat, the chamber will be resealed and decontaminated. Is this understood?" Lana nodded, relief flooding her features. "Understood. Thank you, Krill." The airlock cycled, and the inner door of the quarantine chamber slid open with a soft hiss. Lana entered slowly, her movements deliberate and non-threatening. The creature's cries faltered momentarily as it registered her presence, its large, multifaceted eyes tracking her approach. Krill observed through the barrier, his datapad recording every detail of the interaction. This was unprecedented, direct contact with an unclassified life form before complete evaluation. If Station Commander Vance learned of this protocol breach, the consequences would be severe. Yet something in the engineer's conviction had resonated with him, triggering a subroutine of curiosity that overrode his usual adherence to procedure. Inside the chamber, Lana knelt beside the examination table, bringing herself to eye level with the creature. "Hello," she said softly, keeping her hands visible and her posture open. "My name is Lana. I'm not going to hurt you." The creature's trembling intensified briefly, then began to subside as it studied her. Its cries softened to hiccuping sounds that reminded Lana of a child catching its breath after a long bout of tears. "That's it," she encouraged, her voice gentle. "You're safe here. No one's going to harm you." Slowly, with infinite patience, she extended her hand, palm up, stopping several inches from the creature. Not touching, not yet, just offering connection. From his observation point, Krill watched with growing fascination as the specimen uncurled slightly, its defensive posture relaxing incrementally. One of its upper limbs, the appendage most analogous to an arm, extended tentatively toward Lana's outstretched hand. When contact was made, the creature's 3-digit appendage touching Lana's 5-fingered hand, Krill's instruments registered a cascade of neurological activity in both beings. The creature's biosigns, which had been erratic, began to stabilize. Its respiration slowed, and the distress vocalizations ceased entirely. "Remarkable," Krill murmured, recording the data. "The specimen appears to be responding to physical contact with statistically significant physiological changes." Inside the chamber, Lana smiled as the creature's appendage curled around her fingers. "See?" she said, both to the creature and to Krill, though she didn't look away from her new companion. "Sometimes, all we need is a little connection." For the remainder of the allotted 30 minutes, Lana sat with the creature, gradually introducing gentle touches and soft words. By the time Krill signaled that the session was ending, the being had moved closer to her, its body now pressed against her side as she sat on the edge of the examination table. "I need to go now," she told it, carefully disengaging. "But I'll come back, I promise." The creature made a soft, trilling sound that neither human nor Xylorian had heard before. It was not distressed, but rather questioning, perhaps even hopeful. As Lana exited the chamber and the airlock resealed, Krill was already reviewing the collected data. "The neurological responses are inconsistent with our initial classification," he admitted. "There appears to be a higher order of cognitive function than previously detected." "It understands," Lana said firmly. "Maybe not our words, exactly, but it understands intention, emotion. It's sentient." Krill. The Xylorian's long fingers paused over his datapad. "That conclusion requires further evidence. However, I acknowledge that the preliminary data suggests possibilities we had not considered. Lana smiled slightly. From Krill, this was practically a declaration of revolutionary thinking. So I can visit again? Tomorrow. Krill hesitated, his natural caution warring with scientific curiosity. Additional observation would provide valuable data, he finally conceded. I will adjust the schedule to accommodate supervised interaction sessions. Thank you, Lana said, and meant it. She glanced back at the creature, now watching them both through the transparent barrier. What will happen to it, to the child, once your studies are complete? The question caught Krill unprepared. In his 5 years of xenobiological research aboard Sentinel-7, no one had ever asked about the disposition of research specimens after analysis. The protocol was clear. Specimens were either preserved for further study or, if viable, transferred to appropriate containment facilities for long-term observation. But looking at the creature now, its posture alert, its multifaceted eyes tracking their movements with obvious awareness, Krill found the standard protocol suddenly inadequate. I will need to consult with Station Command regarding appropriate placement, he said carefully. Given the new data on potential sentience, standard specimen protocols may not apply. Lana nodded, seemingly satisfied with his answer for now. I should get back to those filtration systems, she said. Same time tomorrow? That would be acceptable, Krill agreed. As the engineer departed, Krill turned back to the quarantine chamber. The creature had moved to the edge of the examination table closest to the barrier, its gaze fixed on him now. There was something in that gaze, something Krill could not quantify or measure with his instruments. Curious, he murmured to himself. Very curious indeed. The next morning, Cycle found Sentinel-7's corridors unusually active. A supply vessel had docked during the night rotation, bringing new personnel and equipment. Krill navigated through the bustle with practiced efficiency, his tall frame and distinctive blue skin parting the crowd without need for verbal requests. When he reached his laboratory, he was surprised to find Lana Min already waiting outside the sealed doors. Engineer Min, he acknowledged, noting that she had arrived 17 minutes before their scheduled meeting time. You are early. Couldn't sleep, she admitted, shifting her weight from one foot to the other. A human gesture Krill had learned indicated either impatience or discomfort. How is our little friend today? Krill's ocular implants narrowed slightly. If you are referring to the specimen, its vital signs have remained stable through the night cycle. No recurrence of the distress behavior has been observed. The laboratory doors slid open at his biometric signature, and they entered together. Lana immediately moved toward the quarantine chamber, where the creature was now sitting upright on the examination table. When it saw them enter, particularly Lana, it made a soft trilling sound and moved to the edge of the table. It remembers me, Lana said, smiling as she approached the barrier. Memory function would further support higher cognitive capabilities, Krill noted, activating the monitoring systems. I have prepared a series of basic interaction tests to better evaluate its intelligence level. Lana turned to him, one eyebrow raised. Tests? What kind of tests? Non-invasive cognitive assessment, the Xylorian clarified, displaying a series of simple objects on his datapad. Pattern recognition, problem solving, basic communication attempts, standard protocol for determining sentience classification. Lana studied the proposed tests for a moment, then nodded. All right, but let's not make it feel like a laboratory rat. These should be games, not experiments. Krill tilted his head. The distinction is meaningless. The methodology and data collection remain identical. The distinction matters to the one being tested, Lana countered. Approach determines response. You want accurate results. Make it comfortable, not stressed. The logic, well, not strictly scientific by Xylorian standards, had a certain pragmatic merit. Krill inclined his head slightly. Very well. You may administer the assessments using whatever approach you deem most effective. As before, Lana entered the quarantine chamber alone while Krill monitored from outside. This time, however, she carried a small case containing the test objects, simple geometric shapes, color panels, and basic mechanical puzzles. The creature greeted her with evident excitement, moving toward her as soon as the airlock opened. It made no attempt to escape or evade. Rather, it seemed eager for her company. "Hello again," Lana said warmly, setting down her case and kneeling to the creature's level. "I brought some things to play with today. Would you like to see?" Over the next hour, Lana guided the creature through a series of activities disguised as games. She showed it how to stack blocks, sort colors, and manipulate simple mechanisms. Through it all, Krill observed and recorded, his initial skepticism gradually giving way to undeniable evidence. The creature not only completed the tasks, but demonstrated learning and adaptation. When presented with a new puzzle, similar to one it had already solved, it applied the previous solution with modifications. It showed preference for certain colors and shapes. Most remarkably, it began to imitate Lana's gestures, a nod, a pointing finger, even an attempt at a smile that, given its non-human facial structure, resulted in a curious but recognizable expression. "Krill," Lana called, after a particularly impressive demonstration of problem-solving. "Are you seeing this? It just completed the sequence recognition test in half the expected time." "I am recording all interactions," the Xylorian confirmed, his voice betraying a hint of the excitement he felt, despite his professional reserve. "The cognitive indicators exceed all preliminary projections." The creature, sensing their focus on its achievement, made a series of happy trilling sounds and repeated the task, as if showing off its newfound skill. Lana laughed, a sound that Krill had noted humans produced in moments of pleasure or amusement. "You're brilliant, aren't you?" she said to the creature, which responded by moving closer to her, its body language suggesting both pride and a desire for approval. When the session ended, Lana was reluctant to leave. The creature had grown increasingly interactive, initiating games and communication attempts of its own. It had even begun to vocalize in patterns that mimicked the cadence of Lana's speech. Not words, but clearly an attempt at linguistic connection. "Same time tomorrow?" she asked Krill as she exited the chamber, her eyes bright with excitement. Before the Xylorian could respond, the laboratory doors slid open, and Station Commander Vance entered. Tall, even by human standards, with steel-gray hair and the rigid posture of a career military officer. Vance's presence immediately changed the atmosphere in the room. "Dr. Krill," he said, his gaze sweeping over the laboratory before settling on the quarantine chamber. "I've been reviewing your reports on the specimen recovered from asteroid K-14. You've been conducting interaction sessions?" Krill straightened to attention. "Yes, Commander. Engineer Min has been assisting with cognitive assessment protocols. The specimen shows signs of advanced neural development consistent with sentient classification." Vance's expression remained neutral, but his tone carried a subtle edge. "I wasn't aware that engineers were qualified to conduct xenobiological assessments. Doctor." Lana stepped forward. "Sir, I volunteered to assist when the specimen showed distress responses. My background in interspecies communication from the Academy was not part of your assignment to Sentinel-7, Engineer Min," Vance interrupted smoothly. "Your duties are to maintain and repair station systems, not to engage in unauthorized research activities." "With respect, Commander," Krill interjected, surprising both humans. "Engineer Min's assistance has been invaluable. The specimen responds more positively to her presence, allowing for more accurate data collection." Vance turned his attention back to the Xylorian. "And what exactly do you intend to do with this data, Doctor?" "The Interplanetary Medical Corps has specific protocols for unidentified life forms. This specimen was scheduled for comprehensive biological analysis 3 days ago." The implication was clear, and Krill felt an unfamiliar sensation in his thoracic cavity, a tightness that his people rarely experienced. He glanced at the creature, now watching them intently from behind the transparent barrier. The preliminary findings suggested a need for more thorough evaluation before invasive procedures, Krill stated carefully. Standard protocol allows for extension of the assessment phase when new data emerges. Vance's eyes narrowed slightly. "And this new data, it's compelling enough to delay the primary research objective of this station? To divert resources from projects that have been approved and prioritized by Earth Alliance Command?" "Sir," Lana began, her voice tight with barely contained emotion, "if you could just see the level of intelligence this child displays." "Child?" Vance repeated, his tone sharpening. "Engineer Min, anthropomorphizing research specimens is precisely why protocol limits interaction to qualified xenobiological personnel. This is not a human child. It is not even a known sentient species. It is an unclassified biological entity that requires scientific study." Inside the quarantine chamber, the creature had moved to the barrier, pressing one 3-digited appendage against the transparent surface. Its multifaceted eyes shifted color, darkening in a way that Krill had now observed several times during moments of what appeared to be concern or distress. "Commander," Krill said, his normally reserved tone taking on an unusual note of urgency. "I believe further non-invasive assessment would yield valuable scientific data. The potential discovery of a new sentient species would be of significant interest to the Alliance." Vance studied the Xylorian for a long moment. "You have 24 hours to complete your assessment and prepare the specimen for standard protocol procedures. Dr. Krill, I expect a comprehensive report on my desk by 0800 tomorrow." He turned to Lana. "Engineer Min, you are reassigned to maintenance duties on Deck F, effective immediately." Without waiting for a response, the commander turned and exited the laboratory, leaving a heavy silence in his wake. Lana's hands were trembling as she turned to Krill. "He can't do this. That's not a specimen in there. It's a thinking, feeling being. The tests prove it." Krill's elongated fingers moved rapidly across his datapad. "The data is promising but inconclusive by Alliance standards. To prevent invasive procedures, we would need to demonstrate language acquisition, advanced problem-solving, and emotional complexity beyond instinctive responses." "In 24 hours?" Lana's voice rose in frustration. "That's impossible. Even human children take months to demonstrate those skills formally." "Then we must find alternative evidence," Krill stated, his tone shifting to something Lana had never heard from him before: determination. Commander Vance is correct about protocol, but protocols are designed based on known parameters. This situation may require adaptation. Lana stared at him, surprise momentarily overriding her distress. "Are you suggesting we bend the rules, Krill?" The Xylorian's pupilless eyes met hers directly. "I am suggesting that scientific inquiry sometimes requires flexibility in methodology. The primary objective remains unchanged: to understand this life form. If standard procedures would compromise that understanding..." He did not finish the sentence, but he didn't need to. Lana nodded slowly, a new respect for her alien colleague blooming alongside her concern for the creature. "What do we do?" she asked. Krill turned to the quarantine chamber, where the creature remained pressed against the barrier, watching them with what could only be described as apprehension. "We accelerate the assessment. We gather as much evidence as possible within the time constraints, and we prepare to argue our case based on empirical data. For the next several hours, Lana and Krill worked together with an intensity neither had experienced before. They designed a series of advanced tests, pushing the boundaries of what could reasonably be expected from the creature. Through it all, their subject participated willingly, seeming to understand the urgency, if not the specific danger. By station evening, they had compiled an impressive array of data. The creature had demonstrated pattern recognition abilities equivalent to those of a human child of approximately 8 Earth years. It had begun to associate simple sounds with objects, the beginnings of language acquisition. Most compelling, it had shown clear emotional responses to various scenarios Lana acted out: happiness, sadness, fear, and what appeared to be empathy when she pretended to be injured. "It's not enough," Lana said finally. Exhaustion evident in her voice as she exited the quarantine chamber for what might be the last time. By Alliance standards, these could still be interpreted as conditioned responses or mimicry. "We need something definitive." Krill, who had not rested or paused throughout the entire process, reviewed their collected data once more. "You are correct. The evidence suggests sentience, but does not prove it beyond the threshold required for intervention." Inside the chamber, the creature had curled up on the examination table, its body language suggesting exhaustion, similar to Lana's. It had worked tirelessly, seeming to understand the importance of the tests. Yet now, its movements were sluggish, and its once bright eyes had dulled. "Is it all right?" Lana asked, concern sharpening her tone. "It looks different." Krill checked the biomedical readouts, his elongated fingers moving swiftly across the control panel. "Metabolic indicators are declining. Heart rate and respiratory function are below established baselines." "What does that mean? Is it sick?" The Xylorian's expression remained neutral, but his voice carried a new tension. "Unknown. Without complete biological analysis, I cannot determine the cause of the decline. It could be a natural rest cycle, or it could be dying," Lana finished, moving back to the barrier. "Krill, we have to do something. Open the chamber. I need to check on it directly." "That would violate—" "I don't care about protocol," Lana snapped, her patience finally breaking. "Look at it. Whatever you're measuring on those screens, whatever data you're collecting, none of it matters if it dies while we're standing here debating." For a moment, Krill was silent, his internal conflict visible in the subtle fluctuations of his respiratory membranes. Then, without a word, he moved to the control panel and activated the airlock. "Thank you," Lana whispered as the chamber door slid open. She rushed to the examination table, where the creature lay curled in on itself, its iridescent skin now dull, and its breathing shallow. Carefully, she placed her hand on its side, feeling the irregular rise and fall of its respiratory cycle. "Something's wrong," she said, looking back at Krill, who had followed her into the chamber despite his earlier reservations. "Its skin is cold. And look, these markings weren't here before." She pointed to a series of dark patterns spreading across the creature's mottled skin, reminiscent of bruises on a human, but with a geometric precision that suggested something more systematic. Krill moved closer, his ocular implants adjusting to examine the markings in detail. These appear to be vascular pathways. The coloration suggests blood or fluid accumulation beneath the dermal layer. "Is it internal bleeding? An infection?" Lana's voice trembled slightly as she stroked the creature's head, an instinctive gesture of comfort. "I would need to perform a more thorough scan to determine," Krill began, then stopped abruptly as the creature made a sound unlike any they had heard before, a high, keening wail that sent chills through both of them. Its body convulsed once, violently, and then went frighteningly still. The only movement was a thin trickle of iridescent fluid seeping from its eyes, Not tears as a human would produce, but something analogous, glittering with an almost metallic quality in the harsh laboratory light. "It's dying," Lana whispered, horror and grief mingling in her voice. "Krill, please! You have to do something! You're a doctor!" The Xylorian stood motionless, his scientific detachment warring with something new and unfamiliar, an emotional response he had not experienced in his 5 years of research. The creature was looking at him now, its multifaceted eyes dimming but fixed on his face, with what could only be described as a plea. Krill hesitated, his training and every protocol he had followed throughout his career telling him to maintain objectivity, to observe and record, but not to intervene beyond the parameters of authorized research. "I am not equipped to treat an unknown species without proper analysis." "Then analyze it now," Lana demanded, her fear turning to desperate anger. "Use everything you have. Do whatever you need to do. Just don't let it die." The creature convulsed again, more weakly this time. The dark patterns on its skin were spreading visibly now, creeping across its body like a living map of its circulatory system. In that moment, something shifted within Krill, a paradigm that had defined his entire approach to his work. This was not merely a specimen, an object of study. This was a living being in distress, looking to him for help. The realization was both disturbing and clarifying. Moving with sudden purpose, Krill activated his portable scanner and began a comprehensive diagnostic sweep of the creature's body. "The vascular system is collapsing," he reported, his voice now clinically focused. "There appears to be a cascading failure of major organs, similar to septic shock in humanoid species." Lana cradled the creature's head, trying to provide comfort, even as despair threatened to overwhelm her. "Can you stop it? Is there any treatment?" Krill's fingers flew across his datapad, accessing the station's medical database. Without knowing its biological makeup, standard treatments could accelerate the decline rather than reverse it. "I need more information." The creature made another weak sound, its eyes now fixed on Lana. One trembling appendage reached toward her, and she took it gently in her hand. "It's okay," she whispered, though she knew it was a lie. "We're going to help you. Just hold on." Something in the creature's gaze changed, a flicker of what might have been understanding, or perhaps resignation. The iridescent fluid continued to seep from its eyes, now coating Lana's hand where it touched the creature. "Krill," she said suddenly, looking down at her hand. "This fluid, could it be important? Could it tell you something about its biology?" The Xylorian looked up from his datapad, his attention caught by the gleaming substance. "Possibly. Secretions often contain cellular material that could provide genetic information." Without hesitation, Lana extended her other hand toward him, the iridescent fluid glistening on her skin. "Here, analyze this. Maybe it will help." Krill approached cautiously, his scanner directed at the substance on Lana's hand. As the beam passed over the fluid, his datapad emitted a series of urgent alerts. "This is not a simple secretion," he said, his voice rising with scientific excitement despite the gravity of the situation. "It contains active nanobiological components, self-replicating cellular structures, unlike anything in our database." "Is that good or bad?" Lana asked, hope flickering faintly. "Unknown," Krill admitted, "but it suggests a biological complexity far beyond our initial assessment. These structures appear to be attempting to stabilize the creature's system, but they're failing due to some form of interference." The creature convulsed again, more weakly this time. Its breathing had become so shallow that Lana could barely detect it. "We're losing it," she said, desperation edging her voice. "Krill, if you're going to do something, it has to be now." The Xylorian stood frozen in indecision, Centuries of scientific protocol warring with the immediate crisis before him. The creature, this being that had demonstrated intelligence, emotion, perhaps even a form of language, was dying while he hesitated. And then, in a moment that would later mark a turning point in his understanding of both medicine and himself, Krill did something unprecedented in his career. He set aside his datapad, knelt beside the examination table, and placed his three-fingered hand directly on the creature's skin. The contact was electric, literally. A faint blue spark jumped between Krill's skin and the creature's, causing both to flinch slightly. But instead of withdrawing, the Xylorian maintained contact. His keen scientific senses suddenly flooded with information that no scanner could provide. "The nanobiological components," he murmured, his voice taking on a tone of wonder. "They're responding to direct contact. There's a bioelectric field that our instruments weren't detecting." Lana watched, barely breathing, as Krill closed his eyes in concentration. His respiratory membranes fluttered rapidly, and the blue tint of his skin seemed to intensify, particularly around his hands where they touched the creature. "What's happening?" she whispered. "A form of symbiotic communication," Krill replied, his voice distant as if he were speaking from somewhere else entirely. "The nanobiological components recognize compatible patterns in my own cellular structure. They're adapting." As they watched, the dark patterns on the creature's skin began to recede, slowly at first, then more rapidly. Its breathing deepened, and a soft hum, almost a purr, emanated from its throat. "It's working," Lana breathed, hardly daring to believe what she was seeing. "Krill, whatever you're doing, it's working." The Xylorian's eyes opened, revealing pupils that had not been visible before, a biological response so rare among his people that it was considered almost mythical. "Not me," he said softly. "Us. The healing is a cooperative process. My touch provides the initial stimulus, but it requires multiple biological signatures to fully activate." Understanding dawned on Lana's face. Without hesitation, she placed her free hand, the one still coated with the iridescent fluid, directly on Krill's where it touched the creature. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The blue spark intensified, spreading in a network of delicate lightning across the creature's skin. The dark patterns receded entirely, replaced by a healthy glow that pulsed in rhythm with its strengthening heartbeat. And then, most remarkably of all, the creature opened its eyes fully, all four of them, two larger and two smaller, arranged in a pattern that suggested both forward and peripheral vision. The eyes fixed on Lana and Krill, and a sound emerged that neither had heard before, a complex harmonic that seemed to resonate with Krill's own vocal patterns, while simultaneously incorporating elements of Lana's speech rhythms. It was attempting to communicate. "Incredible," Krill whispered, scientific wonder temporarily overriding his usual reserve. "It's integrating our biological patterns into its own recovery process, and possibly into its communication attempts as well." The creature made the sound again, this time accompanied by a movement of its upper appendages that mimicked the position of Lana and Krill's hands, a clear attempt to communicate the connection it felt. "It understands," Lana said, tears forming in her own eyes now, human tears of relief and joy. "It knows we're helping it." For several minutes, the three remained connected, Xylorian, human, and the unknown being that had brought them together in this unprecedented moment of interspecies healing. The creature's vital signs strengthened steadily. The dark patterns disappeared completely, and its iridescent skin regained its original luster, now shimmering with hints of blue that echoed Krill's own coloration. Finally, when the biomedical readouts had stabilized at what Krill could only assume were normal levels for the species, they carefully withdrew their hands. The creature sat up, its movements once again fluid and coordinated, and made a series of sounds that, while unintelligible, carried a tone that both Lana and Krill instinctively recognized as gratitude. "You're welcome," Lana said softly, smiling through her tears. Krill, for his part, was already recording the experience, his scientific mind racing to capture every detail of what had just occurred. "The implications are extraordinary," he said, more to himself than to Lana. "A species that can adapt its biological functions through direct contact with other life forms, integrating beneficial elements while maintaining its own integrity." "In other words," Lana said, her smile widening, "it learns through connection, through touch, through what we might call empathy." The Xylorian paused, considering this interpretation. It was not a term commonly used in his scientific lexicon, yet it seemed to capture something essential about what they had just experienced. "Perhaps," he acknowledged, his tone thoughtful, "though I would describe it as adaptive symbiotic resonance." Lana laughed, a release of tension that startled both Krill and the creature. "Call it whatever you want in your report. I know what I felt." The creature trilled in response, mimicking the cadence of Lana's laughter in a way that suggested not just imitation, but shared joy. And then the laboratory doors slid open once more. Commander Vance stood in the entrance, his expression hardening as he took in the scene before him. Lana and Krell inside the quarantine chamber with the now active creature. All three clearly engaged in direct contact without protective measures. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded, striding into the laboratory. "Dr. Krill, Engineer Min, you have violated at least 7 separate protocols that I can identify at a glance." Before either could respond, the creature made a sound. Not distressed this time, but sharp and clear, almost commanding in its tone. It moved to the edge of the examination table, positioning itself slightly in front of Lana and Krill in what could only be interpreted as a protective stance. Vance stopped, momentarily taken aback by the creature's obvious awareness and intentional positioning. "The specimen appears to be responding to my presence." "Not a specimen, Commander," Krill stated, his voice carrying a new authority that surprised even himself. "A sentient being with advanced cognitive capabilities, including adaptive learning, emotional processing, and rudimentary communication skills." "And the ability to heal through connection," Lana added, stepping forward to stand beside the creature. "It was dying. Sir, we intervened, and in doing so, we discovered something remarkable about its biology and intelligence." Vance's eyes narrowed, moving from the creature to Krill and Lana, then back again. "I gave you 24 hours to complete your assessment, Doctor. I did not authorize direct contact or emergency medical procedures." "With respect, Commander," Krill replied. "The situation evolved in ways that could not have been anticipated. The scientific discovery made here today may be among the most significant in the station's history." The creature, seeming to sense the tension, made another sound, softer now, almost musical. It reached out one appendage toward Vance, not threatening, but offering the same connection it had shared with Lana and Krill. For a long moment, the commander stood rigid, his military bearing at odds with the unprecedented situation before him. Then, slowly, his expression shifted from anger to a more complex mixture of concern and curiosity. "You're telling me this being can communicate through touch? That it has healing capabilities?" "Not exactly," Krill clarified. "It can adapt to and integrate beneficial biological patterns from other species through direct contact. The healing we observed was a cooperative process that required both Xylorian and human biological signatures to activate fully." "In simple terms," Lana added, "it needs connection to thrive. Isolation was literally killing it." Vance considered this, his gaze returning to the creature, which had maintained its position of quiet alertness. "And you believe this warrants a reclassification? From research specimen to a new sentient species," Krill finished firmly. "One deserving of the full protections afforded to all recognized intelligent life forms under Alliance Charter." The weight of this request was not lost on anyone in the room. Reclassification would mean not only an end to invasive research, but also the initiation of formal first contact protocols, diplomatic considerations, and potentially the search for others of its kind. "That's a significant claim, Doctor," Vance said carefully. "One that would require substantial evidence and review by Alliance xenobiological authorities." "We have the evidence," Lana stated, gesturing to Krill's datapad, where the extensive tests and the recent medical crisis had been meticulously recorded. "And we have the living proof right here," as if understanding it was being discussed. The creature made another series of sounds, this time incorporating elements that sounded remarkably like attempts at human and Xylorian speech patterns. It wasn't language yet, but it was clearly an intentional effort at communication. Something in Vance's expression softened almost imperceptibly. He had been a military man for most of his life, but before that, he had been an explorer, one of the first humans to make contact with the Xylorians and other non-terrestrial species. That spark of discovery, long buried beneath regulations and responsibilities, flickered briefly in his eyes. "I will review your findings," he said finally, his tone more measured than before. "And I will consult with Alliance Command regarding appropriate protocols for potential first contact scenarios. In the meantime, the being will remain under observation in more suitable quarters. Not a laboratory, but not unrestricted access either." It was a compromise. Not full recognition, but a step away from treating the creature as merely a research subject. Lana and Krill exchanged glances, silently agreeing that this was progress. "Thank you, Commander," Lana said sincerely. Vance nodded once, then turned to leave, but paused at the laboratory doors. "Dr. Krill, Engineer Min, what you did here today violated numerous protocols. Under normal circumstances, there would be serious consequences." He looked back at them, his expression unreadable. "But these are not normal circumstances. A formal review will determine whether your actions were justified by the outcome." With that, he was gone, leaving Lana, Krill, and their newfound companion in a moment of uncertain victory. "What happens now?" Lana asked quietly. Krill looked down at the creature, which had returned to its position between them, one appendage resting lightly against each of their hands, maintaining connection. "Now," the Xylorian said thoughtfully, "we learn, together." The following weeks brought unprecedented changes to Sentinel-7. The creature, now officially designated as First Contact Entity Delta in Alliance records, but called Delta by the station's increasingly curious crew, was moved to specially adapted quarters that combined comfortable living space with observational capabilities. Lana and Krill were assigned as primary contact personnel, a role that Commander Vance had created specifically for this situation. Their duties were officially described as facilitating cross-species communication and conducting non-invasive observational research. But in practice, they were becoming something closer to caregivers and teachers. Delta's progress was remarkable by any standard. Within days of its recovery, it began to demonstrate increasingly sophisticated attempts at verbal communication, combining sounds from both human and Xylorian speech patterns into a unique hybrid language. By the end of the first week, it could reliably produce simple words and phrases. Lana, Krill, yes, no, and most significantly, friend. Its neural plasticity exceeds anything in our records, Krill noted during one of their daily sessions. They were in Delta's quarters, where the creature was currently engaged in assembling a complex three-dimensional puzzle that would have challenged most human adults. Lana nodded, watching as Delta completed the puzzle with evident satisfaction. It's not just learning. It's adapting everything it learns to fit its own understanding, creating something new from what we share. This observation had proven true in multiple ways. Delta's physical recovery had incorporated elements of both human and Xylorian biology, resulting in a hybrid immune system that Krill described as elegantly efficient. Its communication similarly blended aspects of both species' languages, sometimes creating entirely new words that somehow managed to be intuitively understandable to both Lana and Krill. Most remarkably, the connection established during the healing crisis had persisted and evolved. Direct physical contact was no longer necessary for Delta to communicate or maintain health, but it clearly preferred and sought out touch, a gentle hand on a shoulder, the brush of appendages when passing objects, the Xylorian equivalent of a handshake that Krill had reluctantly taught it. "Touch speak," Delta said now, looking up from its completed puzzle. Its voice had a musical quality, with harmonic undertones similar to Xylorian speech, but shaped into more human-like words. "First way, important way." "Yes," Lana agreed, smiling at the creature's insight. "Touch was our first language together." Delta nodded, a human gesture it had adopted early. "Crying, you heard, when others only saw." The reference to their first encounter still moved Lana deeply. "I recognized your distress," she said gently. "Anyone would have." "Not anyone," Delta replied, its four eyes blinking in the sequence that they had come to recognize as emphasis. "You, then Krill." It turned to the Xylorian. "First, not understand, then touch, then see." Krill, who had been recording these exchanges with his usual scientific thoroughness, paused. "Your tears," he said slowly, using the human term that had no direct equivalent in his language. "They were not merely a sign of distress. They were an attempt to communicate." Delta made a sound that they now recognized as affirmation. "My people speak through many ways: sound, light, touch." It gestured to its eyes, where the iridescent fluid had first appeared. "Sharing tears most important, carries memory, knowledge." This revelation sent Krill into a flurry of scientific excitement, his long fingers moving rapidly across his datapad as he recorded the information. The nanobiological components we observed, they weren't just cellular material. They were a form of data transfer. "You were trying to tell us who you are," Lana realized, a new understanding dawning. "When you were afraid and alone?" Delta nodded again, more emphatically. "Alone is wrong state. My people never alone, always connected." It made a gesture they hadn't seen before, a spiraling motion with all 6 of its limbs that somehow conveyed both multiplicity and unity. "A collective consciousness?" Krill suggested, his scientific curiosity fully engaged. "Not same think," Delta clarified, struggling with the limitation of their shared vocabulary. "Different think, but always touching minds, always knowing others are there." It paused, searching for words. "Like your family, tribe?" "Community," Lana offered. "A connected community." Delta brightened. "Yes, community. My community. Lost." For the first time since its recovery, a trace of the iridescent fluid appeared in its eyes. "Pod crashed. Others sleeping deep. I only one awake." Lana and Krill exchanged a startled glance. This was new information. Critical information. "There are others?" Lana asked carefully. "More of your people? In stasis pods like the one we found you in?" Delta's affirmative sound was immediate and urgent. "Yes, many pods. Escape vessels. When Homeworld..." It made a bursting gesture with its appendages. "Bad event. Sent pods to find new home." Krill was already accessing the station database. "The asteroid where Delta was found, K-14. The rescue team only explored a small section where the distress signal was detected. If there are other stasis pods..." "We need to go back," Lana said firmly. "We need to find them." Delta moved toward them, its posture conveying both hope and anxiety. "Find my community. Wake them." The implications were enormous. What had begun as the discovery of a single unknown life form could potentially become first contact with an entire displaced species, refugees from some cosmic disaster, seeking a new home among the stars. Before either Lana or Krill could respond, the quarter's communication system activated. "Engineer Min, Dr. Krill." Commander Vance's voice announced, "Report to the command center immediately." When they arrived, with Delta accompanying them by special permission, they found Vance standing before a large holographic display of asteroid K-14. His expression was unusually animated. "The secondary survey team just reported in," he said without preamble. "Based on your information about the possibility of additional stasis pods, they conducted a more thorough scan of the asteroid's interior." He gestured to the display, where dozens of small points of light now pulsed within the rocky mass. "Life signs. Faint, but stable. At least 30 individual readings. All similar to Delta's baseline when first discovered." Delta made a sound of pure joy, a trilling harmony that seemed to vibrate through the command center. Several crew members turned to look, their expressions ranging from startled to moved by the creature's obvious emotion. "My community!" Delta exclaimed, moving to the holographic display with reverent care. Its appendages reached out, not touching the projection but tracing the patterns of light, as if connecting with them across the void of space. "They wait. They sleep. They need awakening." Vance watched this display with a complex mixture of emotions playing across his usually stoic features. When he spoke again, his voice carried a new note of resolve. "I've received new directives from Alliance Command," he said, addressing Lana and Krill, but keeping his gaze on Delta. "Based on your reports and the evidence of Delta's intelligence and peaceful intentions, they've authorized a full rescue mission to asteroid K-14. We're to recover all viable stasis pods and provide whatever assistance is necessary for the survivors." Lana's eyes widened in surprise and relief. That's wonderful news, Commander. But it's a significant commitment of resources. What changed their minds?" Vance's lips curved in a rare, slight smile. "Apparently, someone leaked footage of Delta's progress to several influential members of the Alliance Xenobiological Ethics Committee. They were particularly moved by a certain scene involving tears and interspecies healing." Krill shifted uncomfortably, his respiratory membranes fluttering in what might have been embarrassment. "I maintain comprehensive records of all interactions for scientific purposes. If those records were somehow accessed by unauthorized personnel..." "Save it, Doctor," Vance said, though without real anger. "Whatever diplomatic protocols were bent in the process, the outcome is what matters. The Alliance has officially recognized Delta's people as a sentient species entitled to protection and assistance under interstellar law." Delta, who had been listening intently, turned from the holographic display. "Help my community," it said, its voice solemn and filled with emotion. Teach them as you taught me. Show them, not alone in stars. That's the plan, Vance confirmed. The rescue mission launches in 48 hours. Engineer Min, Dr. Kryl, given your unique connection with Delta, you'll both be part of the team. As preparations for the mission consumed the next 2 days, Lana found herself working alongside Kryl with a new sense of partnership. The Xylorian's initial reserve had given way to a focused intensity that she now recognized as his version of excitement. He had developed a protocol for safely reviving the stasis pods based on what they had learned from Delta, combining Xylorian biological science with human medical practices in a way that would have been unthinkable just weeks before. "You've changed," she observed during a rare quiet moment as they finalized the equipment for the rescue shuttle. Kryl paused in his methodical checking of medical supplies. "Changed? My biological parameters remain consistent with established baseline readings." Lana smiled at his literal interpretation. "I meant your approach. A month ago, you wouldn't have considered bending a single protocol, let alone helping to plan a mission based on the needs of a research specimen." The Xylorian was silent for a moment, his elongated fingers hovering over a portable scanner. "My perspective has expanded," he finally acknowledged. "Delta has demonstrated that our established classification systems are inadequate. Adaptation is logical when presented with new data." "Is that all it is, logic and data?" Krill's pupilless eyes met hers directly. "What other factors would you suggest, Engineer Min?" Lana considered her words carefully. "Connection, understanding, maybe even empathy. The things Delta taught us through tears and touch." The Xylorian's respiratory membranes fluttered in what she had come to recognize as his version of thoughtful consideration. Those concepts are not absent from Xylorian thought, merely differently prioritized. Perhaps Delta's influence has adjusted those priorities. It was as close to a personal revelation as Kryl had ever offered, and Lana accepted it with a nod of understanding. "Well, whatever you call it, I'm glad you're on this mission. Delta trusts you. So do I." Before Kryl could respond, Delta itself entered the preparation area, accompanied by one of the security officers who had been assigned as an escort. The creature had grown stronger and more confident in its movements, and had even begun wearing a modified version of the station's uniform, adapted to its unique physiology with 6-limbed openings and specialized fabric that wouldn't irritate its sensitive skin. "Ready soon?" it asked, its voice carrying the musical quality that had become familiar to the entire station crew. "Feel community waking. Feel them calling." Lana and Kryl exchanged a glance. Delta had mentioned this sensation several times over the past day, a growing awareness of its people, despite the considerable distance between the station and asteroid K-14. It was yet another fascinating aspect of Delta's species that they were only beginning to understand. "We launch in 6 hours, Lana confirmed, checking the mission schedule on her datapad. "Everything's on track. The stasis revival equipment is ready, and the medical team has been briefed on the protocols." Delta made the spiraling gesture that they now understood represented community and connection. "Good. Very good. We'll show you. Proper greeting when they wake. Special sharing tears for new friends." The mission to asteroid K-14 departed on schedule, with Commander Vance personally leading the expedition. The journey would take approximately 14 hours, during which time Delta grew increasingly animated, moving about the rescue shuttle with restless energy and frequently stopping to press its appendages against the hull, as if trying to reach through the metal to its distant kin. Distance shrinking," it explained when Kryl inquired about this behavior. "Connection growing. Can almost feel them now." When they finally arrived at the asteroid, the shuttle crew was treated to a stunning sight. The rocky mass, unremarkable from a distance, revealed a complex network of crystalline formations as they approached, structures that glowed with a faint iridescence remarkably similar to Delta's tears. "Home piece," Delta said reverently, its 4 eyes fixed on the view screen. "Carried with us, to remember." The rescue operation proceeded with careful precision. Guided by Delta's increasing ability to sense its people, the team located the hidden chamber where the stasis pods were stored, 37 in total, each containing a being similar to Delta, but with subtle variations in size, coloration, and limb configuration. "Family group," Delta explained as they prepared to revive the first pod. "Different roles, different shapes, but all one community." The revival process was delicate. Krill, applying the knowledge gained from Delta's recovery, monitored each awakening with meticulous care, while Lana provided the human element, the gentle touch and reassuring presence that had proven so crucial to Delta's own healing. One by one, the pods were opened. One by one, Delta's people awakened, disoriented at first, then responding with joy and what could only be described as tears of their own when they recognized Delta and sensed the connection that had been established with these strange new species. The final pod contained an elder of Delta's people, larger than the others, with skin that shimmered in complex patterns of gold and green. When this being awoke and beheld Delta standing with Lana and Krill, it made a sound of such profound emotion that everyone in the chamber fell silent. "Elder wisdom," Delta said respectfully, approaching the pod. "These are friends. They found me, healed me, helped find you." The elder studied Lana and Krill with all 4 of its eyes, then extended its upper appendages in a formal gesture. From specialized glands, similar to those Delta had used, a more complex version of the iridescent fluid emerged. Not tears of distress this time, but a deliberate offering. "It wishes to share knowledge," Delta translated, excitement evident in its voice. "Highest honor, greatest gift." Lana looked to Krill, who nodded once, a human gesture he had unconsciously adopted. Together, they stepped forward and allowed the elder to place a drop of the iridescent fluid on each of their hands. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. Images, sounds, feelings, an entire history flowed into their consciousness. They saw Delta's homeworld, a beautiful planet of crystalline cities and vast communal gatherings. They felt the horror when astronomical disaster struck, a passing celestial body that destabilized the planet's core. They experienced the desperate plan to send family groups into space in hopes of finding sanctuary, and the long, cold sleep of stasis. And finally, they understood the name Delta's people called themselves, a concept that translated roughly as those who share tears. When the vision faded, Lana found herself weeping with very human tears of empathy and understanding. Beside her, Krill stood rigid, his respiratory membranes fluttering rapidly as he processed the immense download of information and emotion. "Now you know," Delta said softly. "Now you understand." The elder made another sound, a question clearly directed at both of them despite the language barrier. "It asks if your people will accept ours," Delta translated. "If there is room in your stars for those who share tears." Lana looked to Commander Vance, who had witnessed the entire exchange with growing comprehension of its importance. The military man straightened his uniform and stepped forward with formal dignity. "Please convey to your elder that the Earth Alliance welcomes your people," he said, his voice carrying the weight of official authority. "We offer sanctuary and assistance in finding a new home, whether among our established worlds or on a suitable planet of your own." As Delta translated, the elder's skin rippled with patterns of light that needed no interpretation: joy, relief, and profound gratitude. One by one, the other Awakened beings approached, each offering a small token of their iridescent fluid to Lana, Krill, and eventually to all the human and Xylorian crew members who wished to receive it. With each exchange, understanding grew. With each connection, the barriers between species diminished. Hours later, as the rescue shuttle prepared to return to Sentinel-7 with its precious cargo of new allies, Lana found Krill standing alone in the observation bay, watching as asteroid K-14 receded from view. "Quite a day," she said, coming to stand beside him. "How are you processing it all?" The Xylorian was silent for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the stars beyond the viewport. "I have spent my career studying life forms," he finally said, his voice carrying a new depth of reflection. "Cataloging, analyzing, understanding through observation. Today, I learned more in a single moment of connection than in 5 years of research." Lana smiled, understanding the profound shift this represented for her colleague. "That's what Delta was trying to tell us from the beginning. That true understanding comes through sharing, through crying together, touching hands, exchanging experiences." "Yes," Krill agreed, turning to face her. "A truth that applies not only to Delta's people but perhaps to our own as well." He hesitated, then extended his 3-fingered hand in a very human gesture. "I believe I have learned much from you as well, Lana Min." Lana took his offered hand, feeling the slight static charge that always accompanied Xylorian touch, no longer strange but familiar and somehow comforting. "And I from you, Krill. Perhaps we should form our own community of those who share understanding." From the doorway came a musical trill of approval. Delta stood watching them, its 4 eyes bright with what they now recognized as happiness. "Already begun," it said, moving forward to join them at the viewport. "Already growing, like stars, separate lights, but together, make patterns, make meaning." As the 3 of them gazed out at the vast expanse of space, human, Xylorian, and the being who had bridged their differences, the stars seemed to shine with new promise. Somewhere among them was a future none of them could have imagined weeks ago. A future built not on protocol and procedure, but on tears, understood, hands touched, and connections forged across the boundaries of biology and culture. It had begun with a simple question: "It's crying." It would continue with an equally simple answer: "Yes, and now we understand why."